before we really start to plant, we want to make sure that the outside conditions are ideal. So you don't want to plant in soil that's too wet, or you don't want to plant while it's raining and such. Your seeds might get washed away or such. And I will go into depth about the planting seasons for the growing season for Michigan in a bit. I guess we can talk about that right now. Why not? So growing seasons for Michigan, where it's basically going to be between May 1st and October 31st. So May 1st, between May 30th is when we might experience our last frost. So it's quite tough to grow plants when it's cold. And so we're typically expecting it to stop snowing between May 1st and May 30th. And then from that point, it's up to the farmer or grower's judgment on when to get their plants out in the field. Now, there are still things that you want to be cautious of besides the snow. You want to be cautious of excessive rain, like what we just experienced and such. That can really affect plants as well. And then also the temperature. So you don't want to put your plants out when it's somewhere below, 30 degrees, 40 degrees. Your plants aren't going to move because they don't have that heat to push them, if that makes sense. So you want to put them in a warm environment. Typically, cold crops, they can deal with 45 and up temperatures. 45 and 50 degrees, they can deal with being planted out in that. Hot crops like tomatoes and peppers can't handle that at all. So typically, you're going to do that closer to the end of May, planting those crops. And we can go into depth about what the different hot crop and cold crops are during the class tomorrow. But once you have those ideal conditions, then you're okay to plant. Let's talk a little bit about close to the end of the season. So kind of April, maybe even a little bit of March, April, March, May. That's kind of like the cold crop, when you get your cold crops in. Then you got July, August, June, July, and August, and a little bit of May, when you can get your hot crops in before that frost starts to creep back in October and November. And there's also another planting window for cold crops in August, September, and October. And your seasons can also be extended if you have something like a greenhouse or such as well. A greenhouse would help protect, or greenhouse or hoop house would help protect your plants from the elements a little bit better, keep them warmer during the cold periods, and maybe even keep them hotter during the warm periods. But once you all have your ideal growing conditions all met, for seeding, we got some radishes here. From KGD, we give our instructions right here on the cardstock. And it's really simple, just planting seeds. You want to make sure that you don't go too deep, because plants have a certain amount of energy within them to push through the soil. And so you don't want to plant your seeds more than twice the width of what that seed is. So a nice small little hole for that plant, and sometimes it's ideal to plant your plants in rows just to help you get some order, or to help you optimize your planting. And for radishes, they like to be about an inch spaced apart from each other when you're first seeding them. So you try to do that about an inch apart. And there's another practice. You just want to come through and cover them up. And then once your radishes start to grow, like these radishes here, we don't want them to over-compete with each other, and we kind of seed them tightly because you never know what's going to germinate. So you try to germinate a little bit more, especially if you have the seed to do that. But then you want to come back and thin your radishes, and the thinning is going to be specific to the type of plant, so thinning recommendations might be different. The radishes, we're going to do about 2 to 3 inches apart from each one. And so you just want to come through and take out those radishes, make sure there's a space in between them. And this is going to help you get bigger radishes, basically. And you're not necessarily going to be decreasing your yield by doing this. You're going to be increasing your yield, yield being the amount of food that you have. And so those plants will be able to grow undisturbed from the other plants, and they have the amount of space that they need to reach their potential. And so basically thinning is just taking out any plant between that 2 to 3 inch space between those plants. And to know if you need to thin, you just want to check your information on your sheets, on your cardstock, on the Plan Your Garden. Not every single plant needs to be thinned, but for some plants it is necessary based on how tightly you plant those plants next to each other.